thank you all for coming out. Good to see you all here. We're, as Ito said, having a kind of State of the Union for Solana validators. We have our whole panel here now. We're good. I am Jack. I'm a journalist at Blockworks. And I host the Lightspeed podcast. It's Solana focused. I also write the Lightspeed newsletter. You should check out both the podcast and the newsletter. That's my self-plug. I'm also joined by Michael from Marinade, Ernest from Kiln, and George from Step Finance. I don't think I'm going to introduce you guys well, so can you give us like a 2-sentence, like who you are and why you're on this validator panel?
For sure. Hello, everyone. Nasılsınız? Herkese merhaba. I'm from Marinade. We are building marketplace for Solana staking. We've been around since 21 and currently helping more than 150,000 stakers on Solana to stake collectively roughly 10 million SOL to 100 plus validators to make the network more robust, decentralized, and efficient.
Great. My name's George. I'm from Step Finance. I guess my role in this particular panel is we also run a validator. So we're probably representative of just one of those ecosystem teams that happen to also run a validator for our community. And we've been running the validator for about 1.5 years now, something like that. So not a stake ball, just one of the 2,000 or so validators out there. So very curious what happens on the panel.
Hey everyone, great to meet you. I'm Ernest Repetny, co-founder of Kiln. We are a on-chain yield platform offering staking and stablecoin yields. In terms of staking, we've been running validators on most of the major networks since 2020. Solana, we got started in 2021. Now we run our validators run about 3% of the Solana network stake. And we're a company based in Paris, France, about 90 people, and great to be here.
Thank you guys. Quick change. I think my mic is on now. Okay. I want to start with maybe the most contentious, highly followed issue surrounding Solana validators of late, SIMD 228, the certainly most consequential vote, governance vote that the Solana protocol has ever had, the highest participation governance process. Basically, for the uninitiated, SIMD 228 was a vote that would have shifted Solana's emissions mechanism to a market-based approach instead of the current curve where there's like around 4.5% inflation every year, and it's going to kind of curve down till it hits 1.5%. That vote essentially would have served to cut Solana inflation. For validators, it would have cut revenue in the short term. That measure failed. There was not enough of a supermajority for that vote to pass. But I think there is still a belief among some in the Solana world that Solana overpays for security. Inflation is too high for what you need to maintain the security of the network. So I'm going to start with you, Michael, because you're right next to me. I'll pick on you. Is Solana overpaying for security? And if it is, what should be done about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think if you look at it from the terms of numbers, right now, every epoch on Solana, every 2 days, in inflation, there is 150,000 SOL of new SOL being inflated every 2 days, right? That's roughly $10 million a day is the value of like new SOL being issued out there. That's $4 billion a year, okay? So that's the cost of new Solana being out there issued. That's supposed to be for staking rewards and to pay for the network security. So that's like what we're paying, $4 billion a year, like all of us here with Solana. On the other side, you have the cost of the validators. So if you think about it, it takes roughly $5,000 to $6,000 a month for a validator to keep it running, to pay for fees, to pay for the server costs. So if you multiply it, say, by 80, if we are shooting for 80 to 100 validators on the network, and then annualize it, you end up at $5 or $6 million. Okay, $5 or $6 million would be like enough, the bare minimum, to pay for the infrastructure to keep the validators, the machines running. If we want a 1,000, okay, maybe $60, $80 million, but it's definitely not $4 or $5 billion. So I think from the number perspective, we are overpaying. I was directionally for it. Marinade does not run a validator, so unfortunately, Marinade could not really vote. But we've seen a significant participation in SIMD228. I think roughly 65% of the stake at least voted for or against. So I would say down the road, we'll find a way how to maybe tweak it, give it a bit more time, and I think that vote is going to eventually pass down the road.
But Marinade doesn't run a validator, but your business would have still taken a hit, right, from SIMD228 passing, because now you're reliant on priority fees, MEV rewards for some of that revenue, as opposed to inflation where it stands today.
Yeah, in some sense. So Marinade's unique in the way that it is an auction. So it is a marketplace where validators bid each other. So if the inflation would be cut down, Marinade would only shine more, because the Marinade edge, it's really in the MEV, in priority fees, so that the relative yield would be higher if the inflation would be to cut down.
Mm-hmm. George or Ernest, do either of you have thoughts or want to weigh in on the question of, was SIMD228 directionally correct? Should something else be put up in its place?
I think it was an excellent proposal, and it sucks that it didn't get up. Essentially, let's take a step back. How do emission curves come into existence? And how did Solana's emission curve come into existence? About 6 years ago, when they first started, there wasn't any amazing economics team and a lot of thought and progress gone into it. It was literally some hand waving and some, probably this amount is fine. Yeah, sounds good. We'll raise some money and we'll do a Series A and we'll make a coin. And it was a nothing coin then. Like, there was no ecosystem, there was no nothing, there was, hardly any validators at all. Tolly and Raj just basically got it started with picking some numbers out of the air. Now we've stuck with that since then, and I think there's a better mechanism for plucking numbers out of the air, and it's not some guy coming along and saying, I know the answer of the number, that what it should be and what the inflation rate should be. No, it's actually just leave it to the market. And that's what 228 was trying to do, was leaving it to the market to define these inflation rates. And I think fundamentally, that is the way that we actually need to operate. We don't need, some guy said the inflation rate should be 2 or 3%. Why? Because he's got a blog on it. That's literally how inflation rates start with crypto projects, is they don't know what's a good number or not. They pick something that it reflects what other projects have done. In the case of validators losing money and that sort of thing, yeah, they probably would. And yeah, we absolutely overpay in the Solana network for security. Now the argument is that, well, 228, less inflation, less coins going into circulation, so that limits supply. Now the Bitcoin argument for this and how they manage fees and miners and stuff is they go, well, if Bitcoin number go up, then even with the same number of fees or a lower fee that a miner may earn, well, in dollar terms, they're still going to make the same, if not more money. Now you can make the same argument for that for Solana, where you could say, well, look, validator commissions are going to be cut in half or whatever the number is, and then essentially number of Solana go up in dollar terms, it could stay stable. So the whole argument of, you're going to lose money, it's like, well, not really. Maybe in the long term you actually make way more money because number go up and there's less emissions. So yeah, I think I hope it comes back in some other form, and would love to see it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was said. I would add that a couple of things. So one thing that was great is that you could give your stakers the opportunity to vote, right? You could give them the voting tokens, which is what we did at Kiln. And I think that's just a really cool. In general, I thought it was great to see such activity on the vote and to see participation this high. I agree with the proposal's spirit in the sense that I do think Solana is overpaying for security. I think it should be a market-based system. I think Toli had a fun tweet, which is like, it's my fault for creating the perfect inflation schedule 5 years ago when I was sleep deprived from being a parent or something. But I think the drop was too significant. If you look at the proposal, it would have basically, at the current stake percentage of the network, so about 60% of all the SOL staked, it would have cut the inflation APY from 8-ish% to 1 or 2%, which is a huge reduction. And it's not just the validators that would have taken a hit, although you're right that on a dollar basis, probably it's better for tokenomics, so but still, it remains that a lot of the participants in the value chain, they get a commission based on inflation, not just validators, but also custody businesses. So the BitGos, the Fireblocks, etc. These staking yields are a way to monetize a lot of what they do, particularly on businesses where there's just huge margin compression already. So I think the drop was too severe, and that's part of why this was narrowly rejected. But I think it will come back, and I think it will pass eventually with maybe a slightly less aggressive inflation reduction.
Let me stay with you here, Ernest, on that question of the potential steep drop in revenue. Because I think something I've been thinking about recently is like, what are the business considerations for validators, and also like who should and shouldn't bother to run a Solana validator? I would think that some of the people out here, maybe they're involved in the validator business, or they're thinking of like spinning up a Solana validator.
Can we do a show of hands? I would be really curious to know. Who's running a validator? Can we get hands?
There's a few.
Interesting. Maybe like 10.
So most people are not running validators. Should they? And because I think to be like more precise, you have the Marinades and the Kilns of the world who run as these kind of validator operators. Clients can give them stake, and they help them get staking rewards in return. There's also this thing recently of like, I'm a company, I have distribution, and someone's going to spin up essentially a white label validator for me so that I can run the PayPal validator or whatever, and people know my brand, and so they'll stake with me, and there's a business case there. So like, just as someone deep in the weeds there, what are the business considerations for running a Solana validator, and who can and can't kind of do it profitably?
Yep. So I think, as Michael alluded to, there's the main thing is the costs are fairly high, so you need to be able to get a certain amount of delegation to break even. There's the hardware costs and the voting fees. Actually, the voting fees is something that should be, there's talk of that being addressed and reduced, which I think would go well with the new SIMD 228 proposal, or the next version of it, because it would improve the economics for the smaller validators. I think there's like about 1,400 validators on the network right now. I think a lot of them, I think there would, if SIMD 228 had passed, there would have been a reduction in that number. I don't know by how much, it's tough to tell. And I think in terms of who should run a validator, there's the monetary aspect, but there's also the community participation aspect that is valued and is important. And so I think there are teams that run validators also for, like I know some security auditors, some R&D teams that run validators not for the monetary aspect, but for the just being close to the network and how it runs, etc. So that's also part of the part of the value, I think.
I think a quick note on this, and you touched on it before, was like, how many validators should you have? What does the should mean? Because if you go, okay, there's 2,000, and then let's say there's 2,500 validators tomorrow. Is that 25% better? Well, what about 2 million? What about if we went from 2 million to 3 million validators? Is that 50% better? Like, where do you draw the line? Because the whole idea of validation is you want censorship resistance, right? And that's what the metric, the Nakamoto coefficient tries to define, is where it's like, you don't want a majority of validators of any network colluding to, double spend transactions or do whatever on the chain, vote for whatever. So you don't want people to collude, right? But, okay, trying to get, say, 50,000 individual people that maybe hate each other to collude, is that hard? Yes. And would we be also equally in the same position if we had 40,000 people trying to collude? Like, is there really that big of a difference? Like the extra 10,000? So this notion of
stake concentration matters a lot as well, right?
It does, but so the question is, when we're talking about individual teams that want to do validators, well, should we aim for a large number of teams to do a validator? And maybe the answer is, oh, I can't get enough stake to do it, and that sort of thing. Well, maybe that's just how it is, and maybe you just can't run a validator if you don't have enough stake. And then the argument is, oh, well, doesn't that shut out people? Yeah, probably. But then the argument is from that, well, if you have less people that are validating blocks, then collusion could potentially increase. And you go, well, if the number of the validator set goes from 2,000 to 1,500, it's probably not a big deal, because the number of people required to collude is still a huge, ridiculously impossible number with a lot of zeros after a decimal point. So is it actually that big of a problem? And that's the question. I don't think anyone knows the answer. People have opinions on what the answer is. But I don't think it's not something that is you can just do 1 + 1 is 2 and therefore that's the answer.
What are those opinions then? Because the Nakamoto coefficient is a little hard to measure on Solana because some people run multiple validators or there's unlabeled people that are actually the same entity. But say the Nakamoto coefficient is like 10. I actually don't know what it is precisely. But
it's like it's hard because like everyone just looks at the number of validators. I mean, that's maybe the number one metric you look at, is the chain healthy or not? It doesn't tell you much, right? You have 1,200 validators now on Solana, 800 of them supported by Solana Foundation delegation program to even get them off the ground. If you take 80 the biggest, that's enough to keep the network running. 80 the biggest have enough stake just like to vote and keep the network running. So if you have 1,200, like if you double that to 2,000, I mean, you need to get stake from somewhere to keep yourself profitable, right? Because all the new validators are starting at loss of $5,000 a month. So it's really this. It's not a positive sum game. People are competing for stake. For you to spin up your validator, you need to take it from somewhere else. So we've been saying that, yeah, maybe it's better to end up at, say, 1,000, but the quality operators. We don't want a new validators just for the sake of the number, because people would go, they would like call to the validator as a service providers, and they would spin up yet another number 100 of validator for the projects out there, which is not really decentralization. You have 100 validators, but if they are operated by the same entity, that failed it. So we should strive to make as many as independent entities in different countries, right? I mean, Germany and Netherlands alone have more than 1/3 of staked Solana, right? You have 2 data centers, again, 40% of stake. So you have 1 client, right now. That's why we're building and excited about Firedancer. But like those are the other optics beyond the total number of nodes that we usually see on the headlines.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's an underrated problem. Is decentralization of validator clients is maybe more important actually than decentralization as far as this like arbitrary number of validators that you have, as far as like, yeah, like are you censorship resistant, like George said. Michael, I'm going to keep it with you. There's an argument out there that staking is bad for DeFi, because if I take Sol, my asset, staking is basically like the risk-free rate on Solana, and if the DeFi yield rates aren't meaningfully higher than that risk-free rate, why would I not just tuck my Sol into a staking account and then never touch it and use it? And you know, if Solana wants to build this DeFi economy where there's lots of useful applications and interesting ways to generate yield, that's a bad thing. There's obviously liquid staking, which Marinade has a product around that, which can involve DeFi, but on the whole, with I think 66% or so of Solana staked right now, is that reducing essentially the amount of dry powder that can be put into DeFi?
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is that if you're looking at, say, the retail, the everyday Joes, the users, I wouldn't say that staking for them is a problem to participate in DeFi, because in DeFi, if you seek yield, you could get like much higher yield. If you're not that risk averse, the yield is higher than just staking rate, so then it's fine. And then even if the rate would be lower, I don't think that would push institutions tomorrow to suddenly jump and start using DeFi. There are other blockers, which is not only the rate, but also you have like compliance, security. So I wouldn't really say it's a blocker. I think at the end of the day, it's a market. Market figures it out. So there's this fine balance between, okay, some people prefer this risk-free way of like earning on the future of Solana through the staking rewards, be it. And yeah, some people capitalize on DeFi and they are enthusiasts. But at the end of the day, we cannot say that the whole Solana ecosystem is DeFi, because there are just like multiple other sectors. So I think there's a fine balance right now. I would put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would maybe slightly disagree. Like, I think if SIMD 228 had passed, and this was actually one of the major arguments for it, was that, let's say the total APY of staking drops 6 points. Like, I think that does make DeFi lending out your soul, for example, probably much more competitive. So I think DeFi TVL would have grown a lot, right? And I mean, no one can know, right? Because this is theoretical, but like DeFi TVL on Solana is a lot lower than on ETH. Like, an ETH staking rate is 3 to 4%. Like, maybe, I mean, there are other reasons. Like, I think it's probably a more mature ecosystem in EVM land still, but like, I think this may be one of the reasons why DeFi on Solana is not as big.
I think as well, like, different things are different, right? So when you use a DeFi protocol, you have to price the risk, and this risk-free option as well. But I think trying to compare them and saying because one might change, therefore everyone's going to use the other. Well, risk is different across, so it might not just translate to, oh, well, now all the TVL, everyone goes, well, I'm not going to stake on-chain anymore, I'm just going to use a DeFi lender. Maybe they don't make that decision and they go, actually, I don't trust the DeFi lender because it's some contract which, look, how many DeFi protocols have blown up? Like 1 billion, probably? Like, maybe that wouldn't actually translate. So making this comparison, I think, is, there's no correct answer, but I think it's not the full picture in that different things are different, people price risk differently. We can't really say, theoretically, as you say, like, well, if this reduced, then this one would increase. So it's kind of a non-answer, but I do think that there's a lot of other reasons you would use DeFi as well. So if I'm just staking with a validator, I'm not able to borrow against that, right? So maybe the people that want to use DeFi, maybe their core mission is, hey, yes, I'm willing to accept a lower rate, let's say by 1 or 2%, but now I can borrow a 80% LTV for USDC, and then I can go and do stuff with the USDC. Maybe that's a viable proposition which actually overcomes the impediment of losing a couple of % on the APY.
Mm-hmm. And maybe one last point on this is, I think the thing that's going to really take off for DeFi and Solana is probably all the payments landscape and the stables adoption, because like once you have all these stables on Solana, you can't stake your stables, but you can deposit them into DeFi.
Agreed, yeah. We're running short-ish on time, so I'm just going to throw this one to whoever on the panel wants to answer it. Something really interesting these past couple weeks has been a couple of announcements surrounding basically publicly traded companies transitioning to Solana treasury plays. So like a MicroStrategy-esque business on Solana. And this involves the validator landscape, because what a lot of these companies, if you look at like Sol Strategies, is doing is we'll raise funds, say via convertible bonds or something like that, buy a bunch of Solana, and then acquire validator operators, stake our Solana to ourselves, and then pass that yield along back to investors. I think there's like a lot of money being deployed into these things. There was a $100 million private placement. There was a $42 million that Janova raised. Sol Strategies just raised a big credit facility. Have you guys reasoned through this on the validator side of things? Like, what happens in a world where there's like all of these MicroStrategies on Solana and they're all also running validators and staking to themselves?
Yeah, so yeah, I can kick it off. So I think that the institutional market on Solana is just huge, and that's actually the reason why I think that we can kind of fix it, is to pull, say, from the exchanges, the exchange staking, and try to migrate it without inflating the number of validators, just put it to the smaller guys, the community run validators. So I think it's a big part of that. So to answer that question, I think it's better than if everything ended up at exchange, just like it happened on other chains. So the same custody platform, the same exchange validator. I think it's better to have multiple private companies to leverage that, acquire validators. A lot of them, they're trying to get deep into the ecosystem through some acquihires. I think it's great on that point. What we're trying to do at Marinade is to ramp up the community validators to get them to the same grade, to call them like an institutional grade validators, so that the BlackRocks, Fidelities of the world, when they come to Solana, they can stake to many and not to 5, 6 currently the compliant ones, including the Sol Strategies of the world. So I would say it's a great middle ground. It's a start. It's definitely better than exchange staking.
Yeah, we looked at buying one of these companies to do this like 1.5 years ago, before this was a thing.
Why didn't you do it?
Well, so that is a good question. Why didn't we do it? We had other priorities at the time, and we didn't know if the thesis would play out that well. MSTR was just kind of getting started. It was kind of a bear market. So we decided against it at the time, just for rather deploy the capital elsewhere. I think it's a great idea. I think more people will do it. Get the boomer money at 0% whatever for the fiat coin, which is printed out of thin air, who cares, and then go and buy the real money, which is the crypto coins, and then go and stake it with yourself. I think it's a great idea. I think more people will do it. I think once you get a critical mass of these companies doing it, then everyone will start doing it. So yeah, I think we're just getting started with a lot of this kind of stuff.
Sounds like you should do it. What's the ticker?
Maybe I should do it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Clearly, it's solving a problem for people not able to access Sol elsewhere because for whatever reason, or it's easier for their retirement accounts or whatever to buy public stock. So I think that's what it's the market finding a solution to something. I don't know how big it will get and how long it will last. I think it's good that it's public companies doing this because there's disclosures and stuff on how they do things, and it's like well regulated for this part of the industry, I think. Yeah, I think we'll see. It depends how fast the Fidelities and Blackrocks and others actually get into the game, because I think it's sort of like an arbitrage, like a time arbitrage now until all these guys get on board.
Yeah, agreed. There's a big question mark as if Solana ETFs and especially Solana staking ETFs get approved. Do these things have legs? Guys, I think we're going to wrap it up there. It's been a very fun panel. Michael, George, Ernest, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks a lot, Jake.
Thank
Thank you so much.